Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of The Week That Really Was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this week ending the 24th of May, 2024. Sarah, you must be mad busy because we're now, I think, was it 2 weeks from Election Day today?
Yeah, when this goes out, it'll be 2 weeks till polling.
For those of you, for, tho-
GG.
for those of you who don't know, Sarah is betrayed the neutrality of the journalism community and gone over to work for Niall Boylan, who's running in Dublin for Independent Ireland, on the European election campaign. So let's talk. Let's start. We're going to talk about the Israel-Palestine stuff. We're going to talk about some more what's going on TikTok later on the show. But let's start with sort of the European local elections because I'm trying to cover these things every day. I'm interviewing candidates for the European elections. I'm talking to canvassers, and it just kind of feels like a surprisingly low-profile campaign so far. Nothing seems to be really happening. Are you guys finding it hard to get traction now? And be honest.
Well, what do you mean by traction? Do you mean media traction or do you mean traction on the ground?
Yeah, I mean media traction on the issues. I don't see like the campaign dominating the news any day, or the leader Fianna Fáil said this, the Labour Party have said this. It seems to be a very much kind of like stick up your posters and wait and see what happens kind of campaign, rather than a
Well, I
battle.
think that, yeah, I think that's the strategy for the government parties because, they're not really in a position to engage in a meaningful way on any of the main issues that come up on the canvas, which I'm sure it will come as no great surprise to anybody listening, are immigration, and then, cost of living, housing, that kind of thing. I don't think that they're able to engage with people in any kind of meaningful way. I think that the belief of the public or the trust of the public in this government is really rock bottom. So I think what the government is trying to do is kind of run a low key campaign. And if you're Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, hope that the kind of older generation who always voted for them just kind of shows up and votes and that they limit damage
The
basically.
low turnout strategy, in other words,
Yeah.
where everyone
I,
else switches off and the party loyalists come out and do their democratic duty and that kind of thing.
yeah, exactly. But I think that when you're actually canvassing, you meet a very different story. And it's not unlike the referendum in the sense that during the referendum, you were talking to people, I was talking to people, we were saying, the famous thing, I haven't met a yes voter, or I haven't met I haven't met a no, I haven't met a yes voter yet. And, that the media were saying one thing and the campaign was quite lackluster on it from a media point of view. It's reminding me very much of that. Whereas when you're actually canvassing and you're speaking to people, you meet a public who are pretty angry, pretty fed up, pretty disillusioned with this government, and absolutely incensed. And I'm obviously, I'm only in Dublin, but with the fact that, tents are up, tents are down, tents are given out, tents are taken away, tents are given again, tents are back, tents are up, new locations, communities that are, not being told, people arriving on buses, chaos. I mean, you couldn't even the most reasonable political person couldn't describe the situation at the moment in the capital city with regards to immigration as anything but chaos.
I was talking to an independent candidate who's running for election in Kerry the other day. I can't say anything more than that, but he said to me that, excuse me, he said to me that somebody said to him on the doorsteps, and it stuck with him, that it feels like a country in which nothing is working. The hospitals are bad. The crime rate is bad. The schools aren't great. They're overcrowded. We've got this immigration problem. We've got, a government kind of focusing on kind of ephemeral things or things that aren't that particularly important. He mentioned the example of the Palestinian recognition, but we'll come to that. Um, and he said there's this just sense of disenchantment is how he felt. And he couldn't call the elections because, like me, he's old enough in the tooth to know that the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and Sinn Féin party vote is out there and it will come out and vote like it always does. But he thinks there could be something big brewing, but he just can't put his finger on what it is because he can't see the alternatives that people are going to vote for. And I think that's what a lot of people are experiencing. They can't actually see because in these European elections, you've got all these alternative candidates. You've got so many of them that it's very hard for anyone to kind of grab the momentum, and yet there's a sense that the voters don't want to vote for the big parties. Now, obviously, you're biased because you're representing one of those alternative candidates, but like, do you think there's anything to that analysis in general?
Yeah, absolutely. And the weird thing is that I don't even it's obviously the government parties, but it's Sinn Féin as well. I think that there's just something has happened. Yes, there are things that aren't working, but we saw this week more information come out that really establishes a strong case that the government lied to the public about those referendums. And it was kind of, not very widely covered by the media. But I think that there's a wound there. And I think that there's a public who are, ready to strike again at this
One
government.
of the things that just, and I keep coming across in this, is like, I don't watch a lot of Irish telly. I try to never watch or listen to RTE, but I've seen a little bit of it recently, not RTE, but Virgin Media in particular, and listen to some of the commercial radio stations. And they're generally not as bad as RTE, but it kind of feels like listening to the news from a different country to the one that you're living in. And I hope you don't mind me sharing something that you actually said in a WhatsApp to me during the week in relation to a topic where you said, I kind of feel like an alien in my own country listening to the media. And I
Mm.
think there's an awful lot of people out there who do feel like aliens in their own country. I mean, like it feels like you're listening to. I listened to the debate that your candidate was on the other day, for example,
Yeah.
where he was up against all the other candidates well, not all the other candidates, but four other candidates in the European election. One from Fianna Fáil, one from Sinn Féin, one from the Social Democrats, and then another independent. And aside from the two independents, the three party candidates seem to me to be talking on immigration to a country that just no longer exists.
Yeah.
Their message was all the kind of stuff you would have said back in 2013, 2014, of kind of like, oh, we have to look after people. Yes, we have to have a firm system, but people are going to come here. It just kind of felt like, do you guys know what people in the country are thinking about this immigration issue? I don't think you do.
And then when my candidate said, that the majority of people who come here are, you know,
Not
are
not
are,
asylum seekers.
are economic migrants, which is, obviously true because we have a rejection rate of over 60%. So are we rejecting actual asylum seekers? No. So, but then he was lectured too about how he should be careful about his language. And as I think it was you said to me, ironic coming from people who've been calling people racist and far right for 2 years for saying that maybe we should have a look at this. And now that the tents are piling up on the canal, now the communities are every outhouse, in-house, outhouse, and doghouse that's available across the country is now going to be stuffed with people because to take them off the abominable tents that they've been dumped in up until now. Like, but when you said that, and when you said that there might be a problem looming, everybody in Ireland could see a problem looming. You were just called far right and racist. And now when it's a political, suits people politically, like Aon O'Riordan, when there was big, huge tents and everything down outside the IPO office on Mount Street, well, he hot-footed it down there, didn't he? Because he knew he was running for Europe to get himself filmed talking about how disgraceful it was because he's got such a big heart. What a load of shite.
It
It's just the hypocrisy. I'm just, like I obviously have been in politics my whole life and involved in politics, I should say, my whole life in some way. And I was in Fianna Fáil or whatever. And I actually, more than the average person, have a lot of sympathy for, the plight of the average politician and how you have to, like straddle two sides of a fence sometimes and try and like please one person and not annoy the other and all of that, and it's a kind of a balancing act that's difficult. And I actually, more than the average person, have a bit of sympathy for that, and I have a bit of a soft spot for politicians in general because I understand the game and what it's like to be that person. But these guys have a lot to answer for now for the last couple of years, because for the last couple of years they've upped their ante, and Aon O'Riordan is still doing it on the debates yesterday. Oh, the far right this and the far right that. Shut up. Seriously, just shut up. If that's all you have to offer the conversation about immigration is to call other people names, but you are happy to take advantage and capitalize on the situation for your own political gain, you're just a clown. Sorry to use the word of the week, but another clown.
yeah. I should mention, by the way, as I said to you, yesterday evening, some poor Fine Gaeler came and knocked on my door. And I'm all for being polite to canvassers. And at the end of it, I shook his hand and said, sorry, it's not personal, but he got an earful. And I'm not normally one for giving canvassers an earful, but he got an earful. Because I just think it's important that he goes back to his party. Maybe he'll recognize me and go, oh, your man's only a crank anyway. I've seen him on TV. I was never getting his vote. But
Yeah.
hopefully he won't. Hopefully he'll go back and say, look, this is what I got. Because what I said to him was, look, you're talking to somebody on your doorstep who should be a Fine Gael voter. I should be a Fine Gael voter. I am painfully middle class. I am painfully middle income. We live in a nice house in the countryside. We both work. We get up early in the morning. We're the voters who should be voting for you guys. But instead, it feels like we have a government, like, as I said to him, if I wanted a green government, I'd voted green. But, this is what I have. Um, and I gave him the laundry list of all the things they'd done wrong and I sent him on his way. Because it's just so frustrating. Like, and then he gave me the whole, oh, well, my local councillor, the local councillor is just, she's on local issues. And I said, well, you go way out of that. I can't put my, even if she's Jesus Christ reborn, I can't vote for her because if she's running for Fine Gael, then that'll go on the Fine Gael percentage and it'll look like I endorsed in the local elections or my vote will be counted that way. So sorry, mate. No. Um, and it actually felt cathartic. I felt better after it, even though I didn't shout at him or anything, but like it really felt better, Sarah. Just to,
Well, but also going canvassing and actually meeting people and talking to them about the things is also quite helpful because it makes me realize that for a long time I felt like I was an alien or the weird minority or whatever. But we're not. Like we're the majority. Majority of people in Ireland right now aren't racist, think that that our immigration policy isn't working, that we need to enforce rules, that we need to restructure the way we're doing it and make it work better. That's it.
mm,
And
yeah.
now all of a sudden, with 2 weeks to go to the election, it's all this, oh yeah, let's do this and we're going to think about that. We're going to start cutting people's benefits and we're going to, yeah, sure. But for 2 years, let's call this what it is, racist. I think people are going to forget.
And the funny thing is, this business that they come out with today, and today being Thursday, by the way, folks, this is when we're recording. The government have now announced they're going to means test the 38 quid a week they're giving asylum seekers, just in case some of them are also working. And like that is not what needs to happen here. It's not that people aren't coming here for the 38 quid. They're coming here because they think they can stay here for 5 years, avoid deportation, and get citizenship. That's what they've been told.
Mm.
And most of them are right about that. So they're coming because our deportation system is a lot laxer than everywhere else's. Not coming here for 38 quid a week. I mean, they constantly get the incentives wrong. And this business of the tents along Grand Canal, I mean, the government keeps saying, well, we're not going to tolerate any more tent cities. And what they're doing is incentivizing more tent cities because every time that people come along and pitch a tent along the Grand Canal, the government comes along, takes them away and puts them in an accommodation centre. So if you're a migrant without accommodation, go and pitch your tent on the Grand Canal and you'll get first dibs on accommodation. And they can't figure out that that's what they've done. They've created an incentive to create tent cities in Dublin. It's so stupid that a child could figure it out, yet our politicians can't. And I really wonder if there isn't going to be a bit of an earthquake in these elections, particularly at local level where there are fewer candidates and the sort of discontented vote can,
I
coalesce
mean,
around people.
I've been canvassing for a few weeks. I've met, hundreds and hundreds of people, I suppose, at this point. Like, I think that a couple of people have said Sinn Féin, but um, the majority of the time it's just anything but what's about independent, 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 independent. And I want to give the government a kicking, and I'm furious about the cost of living, immigration, housing, not being listened to, etc., etc. It's the same all over the place. Like in the past, when you canvass, you get like a bit of this and a bit of that, especially depending on the geography, like where you were. You might get a local thing, you might get this, and you might get that. No, it's
Well, we
universal.
have we have a mutual friend who we won't name, who is canvassing for Fine Gael in a nice part of Dublin, and he says the opposite. He says that sort of like in the nicer parts of Dublin, we won't say where he's canvassing, that the reception for Fine Gael is actually pretty good. He's not the only one to have said that to me. I was talking to somebody else canvassing for Fianna Fáil, relatively nice part of Cork, said, yeah, our vote is holding up fine. So do you think maybe there is a little bit of actually, once you go up the income tiers, things are fine? And, you know, to some extent, are politicians missing out on the anger that's in places like Tala and Drimna and Ballyfermot and rural Tipperary, in the case of my door?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, like it's hard to call, I suppose, but I mean, that's all I'm saying. So,
Mm.
I mean, but then it's
But
I'm
it
not
does
counting.
it does feel a little bit like the referendum, because people who listen to this podcast regularly, well, I ask you to think back to the episodes that we did before the referendum vote, and Sarah and I were both saying in those episodes, look, we see the polls, we acknowledge them, we acknowledge the polling is real. We're not saying the polling is fake, but it doesn't tally in any way with what we're hearing from people. Is that a fair summary of what we were saying? I think you'll find it is.
Yeah,
Um, and it feels the same with this election. The polls are all saying, solid sort of position for Fianna Fáil, solid sort of position for now, not setting the world on fire, 18, 19, 20% for all three big parties. So 60% of the vote going to the three big parties. And that's not what it feels like to me. It doesn't feel like that. And maybe just because we were right once doesn't mean we'll be right a second time, but it just
yeah.
doesn't feel like that. But sure, we've only a couple of weeks to find out. Before we move off the elections, what did you think of the first debate of the campaign? Obviously, you can talk about it neutrally because you had no candidates in it. Kieran Malooly from Independent Ireland was excluded, but we had this thing on the front line with Patrick Bean, Barry Cowan, Maria Walsh, the official Green and the unofficial Green. So they had two voices. Then you had Luke Ming Flanagan, you had somebody from Sinn Féin, and you had Peter Casey. What did you make of it? Who do you think won? What do you think of the debate overall?
I I thoroughly enjoyed it, but sometimes I just get kind of perverse amusement out of chaos and kind of political, nonsense. I can say this because I don't want to be saying this, but I think Luke Ming Flanagan was the clear winner. He gave really, really good answers on some of the things that he was asked. He seemed the most competent. He seemed the most on top of his brief. He seemed, he just seemed a seasoned politician who knew what he was talking about. So I don't think anybody watching that could really admit anything but that he came out on top. I mean, Maria Walsh, I think she held her own. I think if somebody was planning on voting for Maria Walsh at the start of that debate, they probably weren't not voting for her by the end of it, if you know what I mean. But I think that it's all fluff and waffle and not really
Mhm.
particularly insightful. And she acts as if a kind of a doe-eyed kind of politician who's just showing up, and she's been there for 5 years, so it's all a bit whatever. Peter Casey, um, I mean, what could I say about that, John? Do you know what I mean?
Look,
Like he left the stage at one point. I mean,
I had Peter Casey on one of the candidate interviews, and by the way, I think next week we're going to have Michael McNamara and Niall Boylan both doing candidate interviews next week. So if you're looking out for those, they're coming next week. Um, but I had Peter Casey on being interviewed with me, and he was fine. But I just think as a candidate, he comes across very amateurish. I think that works. It might have worked for him in the presidential election, the kind of everyman shtick. But I think when you're standing up there in a debate and you think it's important enough to interject by saying that you believe there should be a three-state solution, not a two-state solution in the Middle East, I think people at home just kind of switch off and think you don't sound like you're serious. And that's I know Peter Casey. We've spoken on many occasions. This isn't personal. I just have a duty to call it as I see it. And I didn't think he had a great night, to put it
no,
mildly. Patrick Bean was fine, but I agree with you. Luke Ming Flanagan was the runaway winner. I mean, Luke Ming Flanagan won himself a seat in that debate if he didn't have one already, because people have to realize we use a transferable system. All Luke Ming Flanagan needs to do to get re-elected is hit 10% of the vote on the first count, and he can watch all the transfers flow in as Labour go out, as the Social Democrats go out, as the Greens go out, as the first Sinn Féiner goes out. All those transfers will flow to him, and he is safe as houses.
yeah,
Because he solidified his first preference vote and probably increased it, I would think, substantially. Because the other thing is, he will benefit from the anti-government vote that we're talking about as well, even though he's on the left. He will benefit from it because a vote for him is not a vote for the government. So if you're somebody out there looking for a good independent to vote for, well, he went on telly the other night and acted like a really good independent. So I think that was the main outcome of that debate, which is that where sort of people like Pater Tabine and Kieran Maluli might have been fighting it out for two seats, I think they're now fighting it out for one seat.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think, well, and then just on the Saoirse, I mean, I have to say, just as an aside, like when you're RT have criteria for people getting on the debate, and I think the fact that Saoirse is on it when she's, polling at the moment at about 1 or 2%, and Kieran Maloney isn't, is wrong. I don't know how you remedy. I don't know how you square that circle, but it's not right. I don't think she had a very good outing either. I think the fact that she called Peter Casey a clown was probably, from an amusement point of view, good for her and probably got her a couple of votes. But overall, and I think, like I've said before, like I really like Patter, and I think Patter is really one of the best parliamentarians we have. But I think he answered the question about running and then, not running in the general or running in the general after it's better on the interview with you than he did on the night.
he probably did. But I mean, I actually, I might be a minority in this. I don't think that's going to hurt him particularly because I mean, people voted for Mairead McGuinness in the last election. She went. They voted for Matt Carthy. He went. They're used to this in European elections, and so I don't think it's very hard to attack him for that when it's a standard thing that people have been doing with European seats for years.
So you
Um,
think there's a straight race then between Maluli and Kate and Patter Toey?
oh, I'm not saying that at all, but I think they're the two strongest candidates to take that last seat. Yes, but I could be wrong. I will say this about Patrick Bean. Um, I kind of one thing that annoys me about him is that he doesn't get angry enough. Like I'm sitting there watching that, and I was watching it on repeat because I refused to watch RT live, so I watched it on the internet the next day. And like when it came to talking about the issue of immigration, which is the number one issue in the election, and basically it's you and Peter Casey on that stage who have a different view to everybody else. And he articulated his position brilliantly and calmly and reasonably and logically. And, if you're somebody who concerns about that issue, he made a pitch to you, but he didn't make an emotional connection. I think this is where Ain2 struggle. They don't make an emotional connection with the voter. The voters are angry, but you're not angry. You kind of come across as, well, we're just a really nice alternative.
I
People
think
don't,
so. God, I don't agree with that now. I think Patter Toey comes across as fairly peed off at times. Like he's quite stern. Like, do you not think?
no, I don't. I mean, this is one of our rare occasions for disagreement. I think he comes across as very calm and logical and rational. And don't get me wrong, some people can do anger and some people can't. I mean, God knows if you try and do anger and you get it wrong, it can be an absolute disaster on television. So the last thing you want to come across is kind of like a red-faced, shouty man. So, but I do kind of feel like there's just some kind, and I can't necessarily put my finger on it. There's just this missing connection, missing emotional connection there that that they as I'm not it's not a pattern. They as a party, I think, need to make more. I mean, if you contrast them with People Before Profit on the left, and I'm not saying that they're analogous or the Greens, but there seems sometimes to be a lack of passion in their messaging. Maybe that's not a very specific complaint, but I do feel like that's the case sometimes. Like I feel like I want somebody to reach out through the television and grab me and say, look, this is a joke. We all know it's a joke watching at home. These people, I mean, Barry Cowan was allowed to stand there and basically sound like immigration was the thing that happened yesterday. Like, it's very bad and we're going to have to deal with it now and we will deal with it. And I really needed somebody to kind of reach across rhetorically and say, uh, what's wrong with you? You caused this mess. How dare you stand there and say we'll fix it when your party has caused? I mean, that kind of level. Do you remember during the 2011 general election, when Pat Rabbit demolished? I think it was another Pat. Was it Pat Casey on prime time? And he basically did you fellas have ruined the country attack, and it went super viral, and I think it hugely contributed to a massive surge in the Labour vote because he just for a moment Pat Rabbit spoke what the country was feeling to somebody in power, and I feel like that's what's not happened so far in this election. No one has had the opportunity to get in the face of a government candidate on television and say, you guys caused this mess, you should be absolutely ashamed. And I kind of feel like that is what a lot of people are feeling, and no one has articulated it yet, if that
That
makes
was
sense.
nice though, that little trip back down memory lane there about when Labour used to not be like some kind of cadaver that needs to be defibrillated on the
Uh,
street.
do you remember the interview I'm talking about as a matter of interest?
I think so. I think it rings a bell. You're just reminding me that Labour used to have,
They were on
like
like 33% of the vote for a while after that.
the Gilmore Gale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Gilmore for a Taoiseach and all that sort of good stuff. Yeah, we're going way down memory lane. Anyway, so I mean, we'll see if it livens up over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I think it needs somebody to inject a bit of passion into it. That's my sense of where the election's at. Speaking of passion, one thing our political classes are really passionate about is recognizing the state of Palestine. Everyone who listens to this podcast and reads Gript knows that I am an unreliable Zionist shill who's on the payroll of Jerusalem and can't be trusted on this issue. So, Sarah, I'll ask you for your opinion.
Well, I went to Israel once as well. Does that mean I'm the same?
Possibly, but you can't be as bad as me, according to some of my readers. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't really buy into all that kind of crap that people go on with. That you're this or you're that, you're a secret Zionist or whatever. Um, I think most people are fairly reasonable. I consider myself to be one of them. I think there's two things. There's a few things at play here, and I think that ultimately where I fall down on is I think this is a cynical political move, that doesn't actually do anything. There's multiple countries in Europe that already recognise the state of Palestine. I think it's a feel good, let's kind of try and distract from the issues at hand, um, uh, move 2 weeks out from an election. I think if the government really gave two shits about the state of Palestine, they would have recognised it a long time ago. But I don't think they do. So I'd be concerned about the long term implications for our international relationships for doing this without any real thought to it. But I mean, and also if I thought that it was a move that was going to, save any lives, do anything, change anything, what horrors are unfolding in Gaza right now, I'd be all over it. But I don't think it will. So I think it's just three Muppets coming out and trying to shore up some extra votes 2 weeks out from an election, to be
Do you think
perfect.
it'll work though? Because I don't.
No, no, I don't.
Like, I have to say that I've been surprised at how negative the reaction to it has been in people I talk to. And people might think, because I mean, my views on my lacking, a relative lack of sympathy for Palestine compared to most Irish people is well known. So people might think that I'm just talking to people who agree with me. I'm not. I'm talking to people I know who would broadly take if they were asked an opinion poll who you sympathize more with, would say I sympathize with Palestine, who just,
Yeah.
I think, were not appalled. Appalled is too strong a word, but disquieted by it. They kind of felt like, okay, we're pro-Palestinian, but why do we have to be so far out there on the ledge internationally? Why do we have to be the country actively pissing off the Israelis like this? What did they ever do to us? Why are we like? What is this achieving apart from pissing off the Americans and the Israelis? There was a lot of people saying things like that, and I agree with you. I think it's a purely political stunt, but I think it's because, I mean, I keep, when I listen to the radio and when I watch TV, it's like I said earlier on, it's like you and I sometimes feel like we're aliens in our own country, but I increasingly think people in the media might be the aliens in the country. That because the media and journalists, I saw Laura Marlowe from the Irish Times literally tweeting, yippee, when the news broke. And I was thinking to myself, you guys really care about this to an extent that the public don't. And I think there's a massive amount of believing your own bullshit going on in politics and the media at the moment in this country, where people have talked themselves into this idea that everyone agrees with us, even though every time an opinion poll is done on this, the number of people saying Palestine is a top issue for them is between 4 and 6%. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it actually might hurt them, because I think it might be another example for people of how the government can't fix hospitals, can't fix schools, can't fix immigration, but they sure as hell can fly a Palestinian flag atop the Dáil next Tuesday, which is what they're going to do, apparently. And by the way, I think that separately will piss a lot of people off, not because they're anti-Palestinian, but because the Irish flag is the only one that should fly above our Parliament building. I mean, I believe that, and I'm not the world's greatest green jersey wearer.
Well, I am, and I agree with that. I think it's a place for the Irish flag, and that's it. And because because like what other flags have been flown there? I'm sure the trans flag or something has been flown, has it?
Above the Leinster House? I don't think so.
Oh,
I don't think so. I'm trying to think back. I don't even think we flew the American flag on 9/11. I'm pretty sure we didn't. But if I'm wrong about that, some wise listener can come and correct me. So like this business of solidarity, you know,
But of
the
course, but 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 it's also implying like the thing is that, and we've had this on the podcast, and people commented and whatever. For the record, of course, a normal person condemns, normal people condemn what's happening to Palestinian children, hospitals, schools. It's disgusting. And I also condemn what happened on October 7th. Disgusting. Like we've talked about this briefly on the podcast before. And no matter what you say in the comments, you get somebody on, you don't care about this or you don't. I care about all of it. Doesn't mean I think the Palestinian flag should be flown over Leinster House. And it's also, I there's also just I don't know. There's a lot of hysteria from people,
yeah,
and
it's
I think the government pander to that hysteria, and I think that they think it's a big vote getter. They think it's a big thing that's going to, really like the public, or they're going to get a big poll bounce from this, and I think they'll be disappointed.
well, I wrote a piece about it, Sarah, and what I said in it was this: like, this government never does anything radical except when it can do something radical that it thinks will get international credit. So if you look at the most radical policies Ireland has, compared to the rest of the world, climate change, we are leading the world on that one, even though it's imposing massive costs on people trying to heat their homes in winter. And a whole bunch of other stuff, even though it's given us these ridiculous bottle recycling machines that never seem to work. And when they do work, seem to take forever to get anything into. If you look at, obviously, this issue of Palestine, we're going to lead the world on that. We're going to lead the world on sort of transgender rights and be the first people to recognize 9 genders. They love doing stuff that they think gets them international credit. It is a pathological obsession. And the corollary of that is they've basically no interest in the fact that I think over 200 people over the last 6 years have died on trolleys in Limerick Hospital alone. It just feels pathological at this stage. Like the desire to be on CNN is I think is really bad for the country. I think that desire is really bad for the country. But I also think this particular move is needlessly risky for the rest for the country. I talk in my job to diplomats from EU member states fairly on the regular, either at social events or just people I've met over the years who I stay in touch with. And like a lot of these other EU countries are just looking at us going, what are you doing? And I think there was a piece in the Irish Times yesterday making that point as well, that a lot of EU countries are looking kind of going, Ireland is writing checks that its ass can't cash here. And I think that's the perspective that a lot of countries. I mean, they understand Spain because Spain is A, quite a big country, and B, governed by the socialists, and Norway, which has been exceptionally pro-Palestinian now for years. But they and isn't in the EU. But Ireland is one they're looking at with sort of like bafflement, like what are you doing? I mean, at the same time as we're advocating for a common EU approach on this, on trade. So we're saying, oh, the European Union should look at Israel on trade collectively. But by the way, we're going to act unilaterally on recognition. I mean, so that was something, again, said to me by somebody this week who knows about this stuff, who said it's the rest of the EU is looking at Ireland like the oddballs in the corner on this issue. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the point of it is. I don't know what it achieves. It hasn't stopped a single bomb falling on Gaza. It hasn't saved a single life, hasn't done a single thing to alter the course of the conflict. All it's done is kind of put Ireland out there on a bit of a weird ledge where the Americans and a lot of the rest of the world are looking at us like we're a bit mad.
Mm.
That's
Well,
my
it remains to be seen where it goes for the next couple of weeks. But I don't think it's going to go towards any votes. I don't think that somebody who's passionate, and I know a lot of people close to me who are extremely, extremely passionate about Palestine. And even their attitude was too little, too late.
And they're not going to vote Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael anyway, those people. I mean, Fianna Fáil has always had, fairness to Fianna Fáil has always had kind of like a strong pro-Palestinian wing. I mean,
Yeah.
wasn't there, can't remember the name of the TD. Was it one of the Collins TDs from Limerick who had apologized for saying something about the Jewish lobby in America 5 or 6 years ago? Um, there was like there's always been a strong pro-Palestinian wing in Fianna Fáil, but there's never been in Fine Gael,
Chris Andrews
particularly.
TD when he was a Fianna Fáil TD before he was a Sinn Féin TD, he was very hardcore pro-Palestine as well.
Yeah, he was. But by and large, people who care about this issue are political people who already know who they're voting. You're not going to find the average apolitical person out there who really cares about Palestine and nothing else and is now going to vote for a government party on foot of this.
No,
They just don't exist. So
no.
it's a strange one. Anyway, we've talked enough politics. Let's talk about something else. Um, I saw
This is
Tik.
your
Mhm.
this is your TikTok. Go on, go on.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this TikTok trend. So there's a
Okay.
TikTok trend going at the moment, and it's kind of like it's taken the kind of the social media world by storm, and it is an American woman, and she says that she is looking for a guy in finance who's 6'5" with blue eyes and a trust fund. That's the man she's looking for. And DJs have turned this into a song, like it's been reposted basically everywhere. And it comes in the same week, incidentally, this is something else I didn't mention to you before the show, but we might as well talk about it, which is the Harrison Butker incident in the US, where Harrison Butker is the kicker, which is the easiest job in an American football team, for the Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs, who's basically gotten in huge trouble because he said that women should be more open to a life in the home and
Oh, in
shouldn't
his
put their career
speech.
first. Yes, you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
So let's talk about those two things first of all, because I have thoughts about this TikTok thing. Do you
Go
want to hear?
first. Go. I want to hear your thoughts on this because, well, you're a man, so go for it.
Well, it's not so much about the women necessarily, because obviously we all have our idealized ones, and the only difference is that women can generally vocalize them. So women can say things like, "I want is somebody who's 6'5" and really rich and has blue eyes," whereas like guys, it's generally frowned upon when guys lay out their preferences to the extent that I'm not even going to try and do it, lest I be frowned upon. But you know what I'm talking about. Like you can't start saying, "Well, I like this bra size and this height and this hair color." Um, but in general, I just think we are now starting to treat people, or the people in the dating world, are starting to treat people like products rather than people. So, like when I heard that, I immediately thought of me going onto CarZone, as I sometimes do because I like looking at cars. And
Yeah.
I go on, and you can browse all the cars for sale, and you literally put in your categories. I want an Aston Martin Vantage this year, this transmission, this color, and it'll give you all the cars that match your criteria. And I kind of feel like with online dating having taken over so much from kind of actually going out and meeting people, that loads of people of both sexes are now missing out on loads of people because they're literally filtering them out. So you're putting in like, you're going like, well, I want somebody to be 6'5", blue eyes, work in finance, whatever. And you're flipping past all the people who don't meet those criteria. Whereas in the olden days, when you and I were young, all those decades ago, Sarah, like as a bloke, you could walk up to somebody in the bar, and 9 times out of 10, you'd fall flat in your face. But maybe you get a girl who surprising herself, might find that she liked your sense of humor or your personality or something, even though she might have written you off for, if she'd looked at you across the room. And I think online dating has taken that kind of spontaneity out of young people's lives, and is causing is partially responsible for the huge lack, what David Higgins, the Economist, calls the milestone recession, where people are meeting their partners later, getting married later, having kids later. I think I think those things might be connected a little bit. Those are my thoughts.
I mean, first of all, I think that again, we weren't in the dating app period, but like for me anyway, like obviously I'm married, but I was I fell in love a time or two before I met my husband, and it was always like the bands and like the I
Yeah.
don't know,
You and
it
I
was
are
like
you and I are almost exactly the same age, and I think we both first of all, we're both married, and we both met our partners. Like I met my wife in the pub, and I presume you met Keith on a.
no Twitter technically.
Oh, so okay, you met online then, but then you subsequently met him in a pub or something.
Yeah, like so we kind of met on Twitter, but we kind of met in person because we had so many friends in common. It's kind of a bit of a whatever, but no, but it was always like the crack and the banter and like I fell for people that I would kind of meet and they'd be funny. I mean, stuff like that. But I think that, so I think it's a couple of things. I think that this like trust fund 6'5" thing is literally as a result of that kind of online shopping dating thing and completely missing the point that the person you're going to fall head over heels with is going to be the guy who, makes you laugh and gives you his jacket when you're cold or whatever it might be. You know what I mean? Um, and I think that they're missing out on that. But I also think it's kind of a symptom of, I feel like, you're talking about TikTok. There's lots of trends on TikTok that tell me that I think women of a certain age at the moment are in a kind of crisis. I don't know, there's a huge big uptick in, kind of a trend towards that kind of trad wife thing, women going back to like baking and whatever. You want to trust a man who's 6'5", works in finance and has a trust fund. In other words, you want him to be rich. And what follows from that is because you're not and because you want him to look after you. And
Yeah,
that's a kind of a, there's a kind of a post-feminist thing happening where I think a lot of women, I mean, I don't know. I think that there's women in their 20s and 30s seem to be having a kind of an identity crisis about what exactly it is they want.
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm not a woman, but like I do spend a lot of time, because I think it's important in the job I do to know what's going on in the culture. And I spend a lot of
Yeah,
time flicking through TikToks, Instagram reels, watching what tends to be mainly kind of young American women sitting in their car, looking into a screen, explaining their problems to me, a random person on the other side of the Atlantic,
yeah,
or to anyone else who wants to. I don't know where that became a good idea in the first instance. Maybe it's only because they're now doing this that we're seeing it, but I don't think so. I think there really is something in the culture where people are like this immense amount of female dissatisfaction out there.
yeah.
I cannot remember watching a TikTok where a man is sitting in his car looking into his camera talking about how unfair life and the dating game and everything is to him. Like those videos do exist, but they're talking about football. There's something the
But because we're in the post era, post women being lied to. Like I'm 40, so there was this whole long period of like, Sex in the City, and you can be like a man, and who cares, and girl power and girl boss, and treat men like dirt, and you're a wonderful, powerful woman, and you can have it all. You can have it all. You can have it all. You can't have it all. You can't have it all. You can have it all. You can't have it all at the same time. You can't have the amazing ball busting career boss bitch and a husband and loads of kids and. It doesn't work. The reality of life is different for women than it is for men. Men have their own problems. We can talk about that at a different time. But the truth of the matter is your fertility falls off a cliff at around 30, another one at around 36, and it's getting super tricky by the time you're 40. So you can't have it all, but you should have your kids earlier. You can't have it all. You can't if you pick shallow men who are rich and tall, and for those reasons, you don't expect for him to not be shallow too. If you fill your lips full of crap and mess with your face and get huge tits, don't expect to be with men. Don't expect anything other than to be with men who are shallow, who are looking for stupid women, etc., etc. Like, it's time to get real a bit. We had this conversation on the podcast before. I was never really treated badly by men because I just didn't tolerate it. And I
yeah.
know there's a lot of young women now, and they go on dates, and then they do like they allow people to just go, oh, this ghosting. Oh, didn't text me for 3 weeks. Then he texted me. I texted him back. Why? I was helping somebody that I know recently write a text to a guy. Like, she goes on a couple of dates. She sleeps with him a couple of times. Then he just ghosts her. Nothing for 3 weeks. And then he texts her, "Hi, are you out tonight or something?" I wrote
That
the
guy.
message back. I wrote the message back for her. I said, "Give me your phone." I wrote the message back. I find your communication style childish and confusing. Best of luck.
I mean, I'm just going to say one thing from the male perspective here, but that is, ladies, if a guy doesn't text you for 3 weeks and you've been sleeping with him and he texts you after 3 weeks and says, "Oh, how are you? How are you around?" He's not looking for your company. I'm just gonna say that. Like, if a guy is interested in you, no man who is actually genuinely interested in you will not text you for a week. Their public service announcement ended. Over.
Exactly.
Done.
But also, John, that guy is obviously not a nice guy, but you teach people how to treat you, and you just shouldn't be tolerating it. And so now there's just this whole crisis of women crying into cameras, you know, Taylor Swift songs and and this and that and the other. And it's like, choose the life you want to lead and then like commit to the type of man you want to look for, make it a job to find him, but and do whatever you want to do. But like, you can't expect the internet or something has gone wrong where there's these women who think that they're going to get a 6'5" guy who's in finance with a trust fund, blue eyes, handsome or whatever, and that's going to solve all their problems. And the it isn't. And you can't have it all. You can have it all in different times. I'm not a I'm a technically a stay-at-home mom right now. I plan on going back to work. I did a law degree while I was having my kids. So
You're a trad wife. That's what you are.
yeah, but I'm a trad wife. But I made a conscious choice, and I appreciate before people start rinsing me in the comments that this isn't an option for lots of people. But I decided with my husband that I would stay home and be at home for our kids for the first few years of their life because that's the way we wanted to do it.
Yeah,
Now,
but can I say something on this? Because I think there's something that really important, and you would never probably say this about yourself. I'm not necessarily going to talk about you directly here, but like one of the things about the trad wife movement on the internet that really bugs me is this kind of presentation of it as sacrifice free. That like this is just the ideal way to live. The husband works, I run the house, I look after the kids. When he comes home, I have his dinner made. We're so happy together. No, if you want to live that life, you can, but it's going to be painful because you're going to have to give up something. Like if the woman isn't working, you're going to have to you maybe give up your holiday. You're going to maybe give up the second car. You're going to have to give up something. I mean, financially,
in
and I
our
mean,
case, there was massive financial, obviously a big financial hit of me not working. But also, I'm qualified and, like earned good money before I stopped working and was qualified or whatever. And, there's some days when I'm elbow deep in the latest, God only knows what, with three kids, small kids, whatever, where I think, I used to be somebody and I used to, people used to listen to what I had to say. And now I can't even get the kids to flush the toilet. Like, there's obviously hard days, good days, whatever, but it's not all glamour. It's not all, making cookies from scratch on an Instagram video. But, then you start to get into another thing where life's hard, choose your hard, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of young girls now who are kind of sold a pup on romance by Disney and Sex and the City and all these, like stupid things where they make them think that the whole of life is just a fairy tale and everybody lives happily ever after. Sold a pup in their career that they could have everything and then start having their kids. Sold a pup in their fertility that it was, an infinite thing that they could just mess around with until it suited them absolutely to have a baby, etc., etc. And it's none of it's true.
do you not think that's just as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, is that not at the root of it? Is it not that like people have like this is a generation that hasn't been told that life is bloody difficult because on Sex and the City, no one ever sees Samantha not able to go out for the night because, her toilet's broken and she's had to pay a plumber and there goes the last of her monthly wages. Like people don't.
Or, going to the hospital with gonorrhea, presumably, because I watched some of the episodes. Like, but
Yeah, indeed.
like, yeah, I mean, look, it's only TV. You shouldn't take it that seriously. But I just think there's something in there that, this hard to sacrifice everything you want, you have to sacrifice something else for. And I think that, I've said this many times on the podcast as well, and I'll say it because, for you, um, if there was a trend on of men online saying that they only wanted a woman with X, Y, height, hair color, or whatever, there'd be murder.
There'd be absolute murder. I actually saw some bloke made that TikTok, and I'm not going to repeat what he said, but I thought he was doing it to make the point, by the way. He wasn't doing it seriously. He was like, imagine if I said I want it, and then he said what he wanted. And it was so explicit that I can't repeat it, even on this podcast, which is subject to no broadcast restrictions. It's just that
Yeah.
I don't want to send people away. And it's just this kind of naivety that's out there. But young men have problems too. Young men do have like because there is this enormous rise of the male incel, the
Yeah.
so-called involuntarily celibate man who kind of feels like the women of the world have turned against him, and then he gets really angry at Because
Well, I'm
there
sure
are
you,
hundreds of thousands, nay, millions of men in these online communities devoted to how like the dating marketplace is really unfair to them. Most of them because they're under 6 foot tall and don't have a good job, and therefore women are just like not interested in them. So something's broken.
but that this TikTok proves them right that there's an element of that. That's very that they're right in the sense that there is a whole generation of women out there, obviously, who want 6'5", blue eyes, trust fund, works in finance, and nothing else will do.
Yeah, but if you are a 6'5" trust fund, works in finance, and has blue eyes, I mean, it's the greatest time ever to be a person. That's the other thing of this. So I mean, and those men are therefore incentivized to behave badly. Because like if you've got like literally every, and I'm sorry now to use crude terms, but if we're going to use the old 1 to 10 scale, but if you've got everyone from sort of 4 and up looking for the as what women would call a 10, then the male tens have the play of the field, whereas the poor male sixes and sevens are getting nothing. And the those guys, the elite of mankind, so to speak, can afford to treat every woman they meet like crap because there's no consequences because there's 100 more lining up around the block.
Well,
So,
in my opinion, they never have to evolve their personality to have the crack. This is so easy to them. They never have to. You know what I mean?
yeah.
All the
Yeah.
best people are the people who've had a bit of struggle, bit of strife,
But
been, been fat for a while, or been flat chested, or been short, or been something. They're always the best people.
absolutely, never having been an oil painting or anything like it in my life when I was young and dating, the only prospect I was to have like some kind of mildly interesting personality because my looks weren't winning me many admirers by themselves. I mean, women are obviously much less looks driven than men are. I think every study shows that. But you've got to have some personality to compete. But then I think in the online marketplace that's taken away. Because people don't get to meet your personality; they get to meet maybe a little box where you write a really silly introduction. Um,
And the
and
fake version of you put all over your Instagram or whatever.
yeah, exactly. Anyway, let's talk about the other element of this, which was the Harrison Butker thing. He said, like, I'm not really interested in what he said because what he said was basically a very old-fashioned 1950s view of what the American family should be. But the freak out in reaction to it, I thought was really interesting. Like calls for the National Football League in America to suspend him because he said these things. I mean, this is a National Football League, by the way, that has many, many players in it who've actually been convicted of domestic violence, and they get suspended for 2 or 3 games, and that's the end of it. Whereas this guy says, maybe women should think about what they want, and there's a freak out.
But that's what's happening. You see that we're just starting to come to now is like a kind of a that the world is pulling in two polar extremes. One, you're either drawn towards the kind of like trad wife, stay at home, bake cookies and apple pie and have loads of babies and walk around in long skirts barefoot, or over on the other side, men breastfeeding babies.
Yep. I'm actually, and I take neither side. I really don't because I think I obviously think the trad wife thing, and I think we discussed this before, it bugs me a little bit because I think they're selling a lie just as pernicious as the feminists
Look, the,
told.
the trad white thing is just another creation of the internet, and it's not really real. The truth of the matter is, though, that if you can, and I think and a lot of my friends have had extended maternity leaves or whatever, it's a nice period in your life to stay at home for a while, and your kids will never hold it against you for sure if you're able to stay at home for a while and be at home for them. Um, it's nice. I think the family as a unit works. It's the best model. There's a lot of studies that will show that the mother, the father, the whole thing. Two parent families works the best for kids. Blah 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 blah. So I'm kind of a traditionalist. It doesn't always work out that way. Life's complicated. I get that, but there's nothing. I feel like a lot of the kind of modern, hip culture is to kind of dismantle the family as much as possible. We saw that with the referendum. And I suppose I'm still a traditionalist in that front, but I agree with you completely. If you're a woman who's, gotten an education or had a career and you pause it or give it up to have kids, it is a sacrifice and it is really, really, really hard work.
Well, you want to be absolutely certain about the man you're making that sacrifice for, by the way.
exactly.
I mean, that's the other thing. And I mean, think people are too unwilling to confront that element of it too. Like women who give up their careers to stay at home with their families are taking a huge risk, and they're putting their lives, future, and livelihoods in the hands of a man. So you want to be absolutely certain that he's the right guy.
Yeah.
Because if he's not, you've made a massive mistake. So I mean,
That's why you can make sure he's the absolute right guy, John, by ensuring that he's 6'5", blonde, has a trust fund and works in finance. Because what could
well,
possibly go wrong?
well, we've solved it. We've solved it. Another successful podcast. Well done. If you're interested in any of this stuff or you have comments on it, send them to us. We do read them all. We don't always read them out because I don't think it's conducive to listeners to hear us just reading what other listeners said all the time. But we do read the comments and we're grateful for them. And we're grateful for all your listenership and paying attention to what Sarah and I think about the world and what's going on in it. So we'll leave it there for another week and we will be back at the same time next week, just before the 1st of June. In the meantime, if you're paying attention to my ongoing interview series with candidates, the latest one, which is online at the moment, is with Derek Blyg. There'll be a new one going up with an independent candidate from Dublin a lot of people won't have heard of. That will be going up tomorrow. And then next week, we will have both Niall Boylan and Michael McNamara, who will be telling Gript listeners why they want their votes. So from Sarah and from me, until next week, it's goodbye, and we hope you have a great weekend, and we will see you next time.